Hello, how is everyone doing? My name is Tommy and I'm from Semaphore. And today we're going back to basics. We're going to see the history of automated testing, what it is, what was before, and what comes next. So in software development, automated tests had not always been the norm. In the early days, testing was mostly done manually and ad hoc. This is because computer resources were scarce and the time on your the machine on the mainframe was at a premium, so testing was kind of a luxury. There was some automation, particularly on large mainframes and big companies, and the concept of unit tests existed at the time, but it was not common, and we didn't have a universally accepted process for software development. In 1970, Winston Royce published a paper called Managing Development in Large Software Systems, in which he describes the process that we know today as waterfall development. The paper identifies patterns that were prevalent at the time, namely starting with analysis, then design, then implementation, and putting testing near the end. Waterfall fit well with project management practices of the time. A common misconception is that Winston invented this waterfall model. In fact, he was very critical of it. If you read the paper, which I will link in the description, you will find that he was pretty critical of the plan-driven process, and he proposed several changes that would make the process actually closer to what we call today Agile. On page 2, for example, Royce states, and I quote, "I believe in this concept, but the implementation described above is risky and invites failure." His main objection is that testing only happens near the end of the project. If we find any design failures or big problems at this stage, we must start over. And this is why Royce anticipates that, I quote, "one can expect up to 100% overrun in schedule and or costs." Ironically, few people actually read Royce's paper. Most people only looked at the diagram on page 2 and said, that looks nice, and assumed that this was the correct way to write software. What Royce actually proposed was closer to Agile than to Waterfall. For example, on page 7, he advises to do the process twice. The first attempt should be done on a smaller scale. The first iteration is done in isolation and the code is thrown out afterwards. The version that's delivered to the customer should actually be the second version of the product. Royce also advised to involve the customer early. I quote, "to give the contractor," this is the developer, "free rein between requirement definition and operation is to invite trouble." And this means that if we don't involve the developers and the customers, and we leave developers in the dark, they will create a product that's not fitted to the customer. Despite Royce's efforts, the waterfall remained the leading process until the 90s when the Agile Manifesto was published. The appearance of extreme programming and agile methodologies changed the focus from a rigid set process to a more iterative process where, according to the Agile Manifesto, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, work in software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. The agile mindset changed how we developed software. In Waterfall, the involvement of the customer was at the beginning to sign the contract. In Agile, the customer's involvement was prioritized and it was running continuously during the whole process. Not coincidentally, the 90s saw the development of the XUnit frameworks, with SUnit for Smalltalk in 1989 being the first ever automated testing framework. In 1999, JUnit is released, and this is the first widely adopted open source unit testing framework for Java. It formalizes concepts like setup, teardown, assertions, and test suites, and this sparks a new wave of similar tools in other languages like NUnit, PyTest, or TestNG. The 90s also witnessed the creation of the first ever centralized version control system. It was called CVS, and this was a central server that stored and kept track of all software changes, so allowed developers to collaborate. Before CVS and before Subversion, we only had local version system. There was no network, not multi-user, just one machine. In the 2000s, we saw an acceleration in software development practices and tooling. 2001 was when test-driven development was formalized. It was a core agile practice, especially used in extreme programming, and it encourages writing tests before writing code. 2001 also produced the final piece of test automation. This is continuous integration. This was the first open source CI framework. It was called CruiseControl. It was written in Java. It was created by ThoughtWorks. In CruiseControl, we can see all the essential elements of continuous integration. We have a build loop to build artifacts when anything changes in the repo. It also has the ability to parse JUnit files to get results of the build and test steps. And we also have a dashboard to view the builds and reports. All these elements serve and are enabled by test automation. Automated testing is what allows integration to be continuous. Note that the dashboard in CruiseControl specifically differentiates builds older than 24 hours, making anything that's not a daily build an error or a warning condition. Before CI, most teams had to build and integrate code manually, and this is a risky and error-prone process. CI also shifted testing from mostly something that was done manually by QA in the QA phase to being part of daily development tasks. And with CruiseControl, CI became the catalyst for test automation adoption by integrating build tools and reporting the results in dashboards and via notification like emails. In 2004, Selenium was released. This is a browser automation framework, enabled UI11 testing for web application, and it became the cornerstone of automated testing from front-end and end-to-end. In 2005, Hudson was released. Hudson was a CI platform that was aimed to be more developer-friendly and an alternative to CruiseControl. This is a project that later would split into Jenkins. In 2005, RSpec for Ruby was released, and this was the first time ever to support behavior-driven development, focusing on writing tests that reflects user behavior in a readable syntax. BDD didn't stop there. In 2008, Cucumber was released, and this enabled the Gherkin language to be popularized. This allows us to write a test in plain English. With CI/CD and Agile development in full swing, the 2010s brought a whole family of testing frameworks. In 2011, Mocha was released. This is a testing framework for JavaScript. In 2014, Jest was released. This is an end-to-end testing framework for Node that wraps over Selenium. 2014 also brought the famous Jest testing framework for JavaScript, which was open sourced by Facebook. In 2017, more end-to-end testing was introduced with Cypress. End-to-end testing saw a big jump in 2020 when Playwright appeared as a more developer-friendly alternative for browser testing. After Playwright, it seemed that automated testing was a solved problem until ChatGPT. The way things are shaping up, it seems this decade is going to be dominated by AI and LLMs. In addition to all the testing and benchmarking of models, we can apply AI to software testing itself. LLMs can write tests, can do TDD and BDD, and can write documentation and perform fuzzy testing. We are also starting to see a lot of LLM power testing. A good example of this is the Playwright MCP. MCP is Model Control Protocol and is basically a USB-like protocol for LLMs that can connect different LLMs to different clients. In the case of Playwright, it can connect Playwright to an LLM, and this allows us to use AI to write or perform the type of testing no developer wants to deal with, which is end-to-end tests. So where does that leave us? Well, automated testing isn't just nice to have, it's something that's a core practice in any modern software development project. Since the Agile Manifesto, it has been pretty much a mandatory thing to have. Testing evolved from something that was manual, that was an afterthought, into a continuous and automated discipline that's embedded in the entire development process. Thank you for watching, and if you found this video helpful, like, subscribe, and drop a comment with your favorite testing tool or strategy. See you on the next one.